sound. I don't know if you can see me. I can't hear any news or anything. I can't hear anything.
Something of a victory in Ohio. You could call it a victory, but it's a very Pyrrhic one.
Yeah, and I think what Dak is doing is why I like Dak. I like him because he's smart and he's a leader. This is what leaders do. They don't let Twitter influence their opinion. Followers go on social media and join the avalanche. Leaders go on social media, have a conviction, and are not influenced by you not liking their opinion.
Let the president know in no uncertain terms that we are alive, awake, and we are woke. We are not going away.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Hey, welcome to Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. So glad to be with you today. We have another jam-packed program for you. If you're wondering why I'm sitting here as a woman doing radio instead of in the kitchen cooking, it's because I already cooked. Check my Instagram feed for some of the meals that I make for our family. So I can do more than one thing, and I'm happy to do it. Happy to be here with you today on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's still Truth for Youth Week. If you see me holding up a book, it's not because we're only talking about books today, but it's because it's Truth for Youth Week, and we want to get one of these free Bibles into your teenager's hand or the hand of a teenager who is in your circle that you would love to have them have the manga comic at the beginning and the New Testament at the back and be able to share that out with friends and family and any teenager. We're trying to get these into the public schools because you have every right to do that. So the number to call is 800-733-4737, or you can go to truthforyouth.com. That number again is 800-733-4737, or head over to truthforyouth.com. If you'd like a copy, more than one copy, you get one copy for free. If you'd like 2 or 3 or 4 copies, well, guess what you can do? You can ask for those, and they're just $2 each. So we're glad to be partnering with them and Engage Magazine, which is a ministry of American Family Radio. Today on the program, we have our primary election rundown. I'm going to talk about the winners and the losers, what seemed to work, what didn't, and what people are saying on the street about the prospects for November for the Democrats and the Republicans. And then we're going to listen to some audio from one of these really interesting people who thinks that socialism is the actual trajectory that the Democrats should be on. Not so. That is not the case, but we'll talk about that. We have Allison Choi on the program today. She's the author of Bleeding Heart Conservatives, Why It's Good to Be Right. We're going to be speaking with her about her book. And then we're going to take your calls in what I'm calling the final 5. So 5 calls in the final segment we'll take from listeners to hear what we're going to, what are your thoughts? What's your feedback on the program? We'll take calls about that. What's your feedback on the election results last night from the primary? What's your feedback on what November looks like right now for the Democrats and Republicans? We have a very smart listening audience, and I think we'll get some great calls on that. You can follow me at Stacey on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. StaceyOnTheRight.com is a website where you can subscribe and get the newsletter once a week. And then in hour 2, we're going to be talking about Rosie O'Donnell. She says the Trump rallies are fake, that the people who attend them are paid. Kind of an interesting assertion from her, considering she's a Democrat. And we're also going to be talking about Adam Schiff. He refuses to admit that thus far we've seen no evidence of any wrongdoing by the president. And there's an important thing that we have to discuss about that. Also, the president of the United States is in Bedminster, New Jersey, at his estate there. He's been there for a few days. Melania's there with him. And they are actually resting and relaxing, and he's working from there. And they had a fantastic fundraiser with a bunch of business leaders. And I have the list of attendees right here in my hot little hand. So before we get into this trajectory for the Democrats, I want to kind of run down a list of things that Donald Trump's not getting credit for. And make no mistake about it. If the president needs criticism, if there's something he's doing that I don't agree with, I'm going to hit him on that, because that's accountability. And really, a friend who can never tell you anything bad or anything wrong is not a true friend. That's not true friendship. Iron sharpens iron. So he needs to be held accountable by us, the voters, the people who put him there, so that we can get even more from him, more productivity, more answering of promises, more of what we ask him to go there and do. So here's just a partial list of what the president has been simply killing it on since he became the president of the United States. Getting the EU to agree to begin balancing the trade deficit by basically moving towards free trade, true free trade, which means they don't get more out of the deal than we do. China agreeing to begin balancing the trade deficit. The fair trade agreement is what's up next. That's what comes. The CBO claiming that tax cuts are paying for themselves. Are you kidding me? We were told that this planet would cease to turn on its axis if the Republicans cut taxes, especially for businesses. And instead, the tax cuts are paying for themselves. CBO also announcing that they now expect the GDP to be 6.1 trillion with a T, bigger by 2027 than they expected it to be before the tax reform was passed. Trump won the 60-year-old struggle for NATO to pay their fair share. Others either didn't try or went in with their little mealy-mouthed, lily-livered attempts and were thwarted. Unemployment is at the lowest level in 50 years. Black unemployment rate has fallen to an all-time low. Hispanic unemployment rate fallen to the lowest level ever in the history of the United States, tracking that data. Over 550 major companies have already given over 6 million employee bonuses, pay raises, and benefit increases because of the tax reform. We've added over 4 million jobs already just by slashing burdensome and ludicrous government regulations, cutting the red tape. Trump has already brought back $725,000 from overseas. Remember, Obama said it couldn't be done. He asked if Trump had a magic wand. I guess the answer to that is magic wand. Check. Yeah, he has one. And then the fewest jobless claims since 1973. The Dow Jones, NASDAQ, S&P 500 have all set more record highs than at any other time in history. The U.S. stock market and your 401k and mine have gained $5 trillion in wealth since Trump was elected. The U.S. manufacturing index soared to a 33-year high. The best numbers ever in this period were the best since 1983, which was President Ronald Reagan. Trump's unleashing our military might where Obama held it back. Trump has overseen the annihilation of ISIS in 9 short months after Obama said his grandchildren's generation will still be fighting ISIS. Thank God he was wrong about that. I'm sure his grandchildren will thank him whenever they materialize. And housing sales are red hot again. And the food stamp use has fallen to the lowest level in 23 years. And that's just a partial list. So let's get to last night. Last night was a very interesting primary evening. The GOP had some interesting wins. Honestly, it was one of those nights where I was up so late last night, and I'm regretting it today, y'all, totally. I was checking and refreshing our Secretary of State website so I could get the returns as they came in, because I was watching turnout, but I was also looking for an upset if there was going to be one. And I feel like there kind of was in the auditor race, which is, it's a statewide position. Not many people outside the state of Missouri would care about it. But let's run down the stuff that nationally everyone cares about. First off, John James, military combat veteran, pilot, happens to be of the permanent tan, and he won his election after being endorsed by President Trump. John James has won the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Michigan, so he's going to go up against the Democrat in November, and he actually has a chance of winning. So I'm Chairwoman McDaniels of the RNC. Let's see you pump some money into that race. Get some social media cranking. Get a few interns working on making sure that John James has everything he needs to pull that home in November. Susan Hutchinson, Republican. She's advancing to the November election for the U.S. Senate in Washington. Republican Jamie Herrera Butler advances to the November election in Washington's 3rd Congressional District. Kevin Yoder won the Republican nomination for U.S. House in Kansas's 3rd Congressional District, and Republican Dino Rossi advances to November in Washington's 8th congressional race. in their congressional district. Breaking, Republican Kathy McMorris Rogers advancing to her November election in Washington's 5th congressional, and Douglas Deitman advancing in Washington's 6th congressional district. You got Joseph Brumbles, who won last night, Bill Shute in Michigan's primary election for governor. Come on now. These are fantastic developments because these were the candidates that we wanted, not the kind of candidates that the Democrats would have preferred to face in November. Josh Hawley, he came on our program. I still have not yet had an answer from Claire McCaskill on coming on the program. I'd love to speak with her. I live in the Show Me State. I vote here. I pay taxes here. Our kids are getting an education here. We own property here. Claire McCaskill represents me in the Senate. I would prefer that she honor just the fact that I'm a taxpayer and a constituent by coming on this program. Let's see if she answers. We've invited her. The producer has reached out. We will do so again. You've got Roger Marshall winning the Republican nomination for U.S. House in Kansas's 1st congressional. Ron Estes winning the Republican nom in Kansas's 4th. And Vicky Hartzler trounced her primary challenge in Missouri's 4th congressional. Blaine Lukemeyer, that's Missouri's 3rd congressional. He won. And you've got Jacob Turk, longtime friend Jacob Turk out of the Kansas City area, winning his Republican nomination for U.S. House in Missouri's 5th. And Billy Long winning in Missouri's 7th. And Wagner pulling it through easily in Missouri's 2nd. So uncontested races were not included in this list, because we all know how that worked. And so what do we have going on? Well, that's on the Republican side. But what happened last night with the Democrats? Well, they had some interesting, only a couple of the people that Ocasio-Cortez, socialist extraordinaire, endorsed. Only a couple of them actually pulled it through. But a bunch of people that she endorsed did not pull through. So I'm not so sure if that socialism thing has taken fully. But here's a guy. His name is Marcos Mulitsas. He writes for, I think it's Vox. It might be Daily Cost. He's a Daily Cost writer. And he says that the Democrats better embrace that socialist label if they want to win in 2020. It's number 2.
The establishment is terrified of that word, socialism. But if we learned one thing from the Obama years, it's that Republicans are going to call us socialists no matter what we do. So we might as well give them the real thing.
Look, this is going to be, I think this is going to be, though, a big debate point on that Democratic primary stage in 2020, isn't it?
I don't even think it's going to be a debate point. You either embrace the label and own it and be a player, or you can be like Andrew Cuomo and be off on the sidelines and irrelevant. That's where this is going. Because when you really look at what that so-called socialist platform is, and Nixon's right, they're going to accuse us of being communist before all is said and done. When you look at it, it's basically healthcare, access to healthcare, access to education. I mean, these are things that people actually like. If you go down item by item, people actually want these things. Donald Trump may not. He doesn't want his taxes to go up. But everybody else kind of does. So I actually want to have that debate. Let them talk about what it means to be a socialist. We're not the party that's being bought and paid for by Russia. We want to talk about this, the socialists. We are the party that is looking out for Americans and America.
No, that's not even true. It's not even close to true. And what he said about Donald Trump not wanting his taxes to go up, that's true. What he said about everyone else wanting their taxes to go up, false. This isn't about Donald Trump's taxes. And I have some information for you on that. We're actually going to talk about the Democrats' socialist agenda costing $42.5 trillion over the next decade. And this is according to Vox, which is hard on the left. It's not a little leftist. It's hardcore leftism. Everyone who writes for them is a leftist, save for one or two opinion reporters, etc. They are absolutely calling these people on the carpet about their plans. We're talking about not just bankrupting the federal government by spending more than one of our yearly outlays, but spending more than that and then still needing more money. We're talking about them taking, even if they take 95% of the profits of every single company, entity based in the United States, if they take 95% of their profits and spend all of that, first of all, they'll have destroyed the means of creating new wealth, but they will then still need more money. We're going to go over this. We'll get back to it. Up next, we have our guest for this hour. It's Allison Choi. She wrote a book that's fantastic. Why do we interview authors. Why do we talk about books? Because it's one of the things that wealthy people do that people who don't have any money don't do. Poor people watch television. Wealthy people read books. That's one of the reasons we interview authors on this show. We'll be back with her and more here on Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Keep it here.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I want you to think of a Christian leader God has used in your spiritual formation. This person's ministry has enriched your life. Your walk with Christ is stronger because of him or her. Can you pinpoint what qualities in that leader really make the difference? Because I guarantee you, it takes more than education or talent to make a great leader. We see some key ingredients of a godly leader in 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verses 1 through 3. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And he did right in the sight of the Lord and walked in the ways of his father David, and did not turn aside to the right or to the left. For in the 8th year of his reign, while he was still a youth, he began to seek the God of his father David. And in the 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherah poles, the carved images, and the molten images. So what really made the difference in Josiah's life? Well, number one, he had the resolve to do what was right in the sight of God. I don't know where it came from, but somewhere along the line he developed an insatiable appetite to do what was right before God. Number two, he resolved to seek him and his wisdom. There was a moment-by-moment dependency upon God. He continually sought the Lord. Then thirdly, he resolved to courageously act based upon what God had told him to do. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. What I just described is what biblical success in leadership is really all about. Determined to be a godly difference maker. Order your life and decisions based upon what God wants, and you will indeed make a difference.
You've been listening to Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia, and heard on the weekly program Living a Legacy. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us. We are still working with some new equipment here. We have a yet another computer. I told the kids one day they're going to come in here and I'm going to be broadcasting the show from like a U-shaped wall of all screens, and I'll be touching things and going, can you hear that? Can you hear that? So with all of that going on, thank you for being here today. Hey to everyone who's watching on a live stream, whether it's Periscope, YouTube, Facebook, anything like that. And also, thank you so much to the people who listen to us on terrestrial radio. Fantastic to be with you today. And I am excited about speaking to our next guest. We have Allison Lee Pillinger Choi, author of Bleeding Heart Conservatives, Why It's Good to Be Right. Thank you so much, Allison, for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me on. Great to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the book. Why did you write a book about bleeding heart conservatives?
I wrote this book, Bleeding Heart Conservatives, because I just thought it was time for me to speak up and speak out and contribute to the conservative conversation and just the national conversation of politics and why I chose to be conservative and value the policies that are put forth by conservative leaders, because I think that it's truly the better way, the better path to a greater society and a greater world for everyone, whether you are a conservative, Democrat, whatever your racial or religious background is. And I titled the book Bleeding Heart Conservatives because, of course, there's the label Bleeding Heart Liberals, which everyone knows better, but I don't think that liberals have the exclusive rights on what it means to be a bleeding heart and have compassion for your fellow American and fellow people.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about what that means, because in order for the listeners and even myself, I read as much as I could about you in the book beforehand, but I really want people to kind of understand what the terminology means, because you kind of explain it in the book so you can set the stage for, you go into a wide-ranging list of subjects, and all of them have to do with the core of conservatism and what people really believe. So what is the Bleeding Heart Conservative?
Bleeding Heart Conservative understands that there are, as you said, dozens and dozens of issues out there, and is not a one-issue voter. Bleeding Heart Conservative is an independent thinker who believes in ideals like limited government and hard work, meritocracy, a robust civic society, founding virtues and values that made our country the most prosperous and in conservatives' opinions, the most exceptional country in this world that has ever seen. That doesn't mean that we're a perfect world. We're always seeking to, as a perfect country, we are always seeking to be better. But a Bleeding Heart Conservative understands that this country is exceptional in that it's contributed the most human flourishing to the most possible people, and we wanted to see that continue, and we want to continue the traditions and the practices that have made our country what it is, while understanding, mistakes from the past, fixing that, but that doesn't discredit how our country has and our value system and our policies has overall contributed to the most human flourishing and most opportunity for all Americans.
Sure. So when you say there's not a one-issue voter, what do you mean by that?
Well, so I'm a millennial, and I found that of my peer group that the lightning rod hot button topics include things like same-sex marriage, pro-life, pro-choice debate, gun control, which these are often in the on the liberal narrative and mainstream media are hyper-focused, and in such a way that it makes at least my peer group feel like this is the only issue that will determine if you land right of center or left of center. And for one, there's debates to be had on it against the liberal narrative of what is the right policy on these, for instance, 3 hot button issues. But there are dozens and dozens of issues out there that conservatives care about that aren't even kind of introduced into the conversation, because these 1 or 2 issues kind of overwhelm the narrative. And so while we can have debates about the virtues of, same-sex marriage, whether you're for or against it, pro-life, pro-choice, where on from the conception of life to the birth of a human being, like what is the right answer? There are debates to be had. I certainly have my own opinions, but I also want to explain to a big chunk of the population that is just blinded to these other issues, such as the virtues of democratic republic capitalist society. There are foreign policy issues that get overlooked. There are privacy issues that aren't addressed because like 3 specific issues just overwhelm the conversation. And I want to introduce all these other issues that will open the minds of at least my peer group to say, oh, you know, there are other things that politicians, that community leaders should be talking about and debating about, not just these lightning rod issues that cause such division and polarization in the national conversation.
So I find that interesting, but I'm hard on the right. I'm what would be called a Bible thumper. I'm a social conservative, and I think that there's a reason why Republicans have in the past used the term bleeding heart liberal as an insult, because it means that the person is governing their decision-making process from their emotional center. And traditionally speaking, decisions that are made based upon how you feel are not the ones that yield the results that are beneficial for you in the long run. So how does being a bleeding heart conservative advance the ideals and goals of the Republican Party and the conservative movement?
Well, the way that I explain each of these dozens and dozens of issues in my book is to explain that how you feel in the near term shouldn't dictate what is actually good or bad in the longer term. And I think that as conservatives, we're all thinking more about the longer term and 2 steps ahead rather than, for example, we believe that life begins at conception. Well, so the debate to be had in terms of the abortion debate is not, oh, conservatives are taking away the women's right to choose. No, it's we're giving rights to the human life that is in a woman's stomach. So, and as a woman, as an author, and I think that's great what you're doing, and I wanted to contribute to that. As a woman, conservative woman, I wanted to explain that, no, I'm a woman too, and I don't believe that this debate is about taking rights away from a woman. It is about giving rights to the human life that's in her body. And then at that point, then it gets the apolitical or / liberal to say, oh, you know, I never thought of it in that context. Because the near-term satisfaction is just to say, well, it's a woman's right to choose what she wants to do with her body. This is not about getting a tattoo. You know, this is that is something you do to your body. But this is about, oh, there's a human life. Okay, well, let's talk about where does it begin. If you don't believe it begins at conception, then what, 3 months down the line? Then, you know, within the 9-month gestation period. Then is it 6 months down the line? Then is it, 8 months? You know, then you get people thinking of in the real complexities of the debate to be had. And I understand, like, hard right would be, you know, absolutely no exceptions to the rule of, in terms of that there should be abortion. And I respect that opinion 100%. My goal here is to get people who haven't seen the light on the right to at least not shut down the argument, to use their brain as an independent thinker and not say, oh, I'm a woman, so therefore I'm pro-choice. No, there is a complex discussion to be had before you just shut down anything that's labeled conservative or Republican or right of center. And I use this sort of strategy on all the topics, and as the ones that I've mentioned already, but in all the topics that I use, you know, emotion in a sense, but logical emotion, that in the long term, that is what should count. It's not just about giving a handout because it makes you feel good to be helping a person down on his or her luck. No, but like work ethic, that is something that we should be giving to people who you know, need that to become self-sufficient, because in the long term, that's going to help them. That's going to help everybody overall.
I have to say, yes, absolutely. And I appreciate the explanation. And I want to kind of piggyback on what you said, because in the beginning, and I'm hard on the right. And the reason that I can say I'm hard on the right so confidently is because the left has successfully moved a huge segment of America to the left. And so the further to the left the entire normative political spectrum moves, the more right-leaning people appear to be, when in reality, the things that I believe 40 years ago would have been mainstream Democrats and Republicans believe those same things. But now you have the Democrats really,
I hear
you know what I mean? They're outside the pale.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who, if I took your tack and I explained it, look, this is how we feel, this is our knee-jerk reaction, but this is the policy and this is where we can come down on it and kind of talk in that way, you're actually kind of we're speaking the same language, because I've been advocating for people to take a softer approach, not because we don't believe what we believe, but because a softer approach enables the other person to talk and to hear you, and then you can talk and hear them. And then you can find that, because even though I'm hard on the right and I'm totally pro-life, if I could find a plurality of Democrats who are willing to vote for eliminating abortion to a certain degree, so eliminating a huge chunk of abortions, because the majority of the abortion in this country, for an example, to take an issue, it's contraceptive based. And if they said, well, as long as we can do health of the mother, life of the mother, rape and incest, then we'll eliminate all of the other convenient type abortions. I would not say, no, I'm going to hold out for you to be willing to do it all. I'd say, yes, I'll take that, because incrementalism mandates that I save, out of the 958,000 abortions for 2016, that would eliminate all of them, but like 6%. So would you rather have 94% less abortions or have 0% less abortions and keep arguing over the semantics? Would I still want to eliminate that last 6%? Yes, I would. But I wouldn't sacrifice the 94% for that. And so that to some people means, well, you're not really pro-life. Well, that's not true. I am. I want all abortion eliminated. But in the interim, to get there, wouldn't it be great if we leapt from 958 to, under 100,000 abortions a year in this country? I mean, think about the magnitude of what we're saying. 958,000 abortions a year is more than three times the population of the city of St. Louis that we abort on a yearly basis. So, but you can't even get there if we come to the conversation, each person kind of hammering home their points. And it sounds to me like you're advocating for and writing about having a nuanced conversation that involves maybe some compromise, maybe a lot of disagreement, but definitely getting further along than we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of how you've had to become classified as hard right, where really, decades ago it would have just been, kind of a mainstream thought or mainstream conversation. But because this country has become so much more polarized, it is harder to get that sort of the softer approach that I'm taking. And I'm so grateful that there are people like you that are taking the more fist-pounding approach. And when I can have the attention of, someone who doesn't agree with me, I will be more respectfully fist-pounding. And I think that it takes different approaches. Different audiences respond to different kinds of things. And so, with there are different chess pieces on the table. I'm so grateful for you doing how you are doing it. And because you're in the public spotlight, you have to, right? I'm kind of more covert in my approach, but I want to be able to get the conversation going, get the minds open to then listen to people like you and be like, you know what? I agree, or, I still don't agree, but I'm not going to accuse Stacey of, she's taking rights away from women and, fill in whatever the liberal slanderous narrative is that they want to apply to any of our, the policy preferences we have. And to your point about, incrementalism and the importance of that sort of, I don't want to say strategy to belittle it. It's a practical matter. It makes me think back during Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln days where, fighting for suffrage, not just for, people know it as women's suffrage, but also the right for black men to vote. the black man's vote came first and came onto the table, proposed first, women got really pissed at this. But the strategy at the time was, look, we're not going to be able to pass something with asking for blacks to give the right to vote to black men and women, so we're going to have to do this incrementally. I'm not saying that, I would have been a fan of that at the time. Like, I don't know, but looking back in history, I can see how, like you're saying with the pro-life movement, you would be willing to table the health of the mother.
I see. I hear the music, and we're up against it, but I want to say thanks. Allison Choi, thank you so much for joining the program today. We'll be back with more right after this.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something or why you couldn't attend a certain event instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God. But fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to him. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I come to steal, kill, and to destroy. You belong to me. Your soul, your mind, and your body. You chose death over life. You are mine, forever and ever and ever.
Hell is real. Matthew chapter 25 verse 46 says there will be those who will receive eternal punishment in hell, but the righteous will have eternal life in heaven with our Savior Jesus Christ. Which will you choose? Let's go deeper at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Donald Trump's America.
1 year ago today, President Trump, facing a growing nuclear threat from North Korea, warned the country while on vacation in New Jersey against any new provocations.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The president then added that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has, in his words, been very threatening beyond a normal state.
And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly, power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
But in the past year, relations have improved dramatically between the U.S. and North Korea, with President Trump meeting Kim for an historic summit in Singapore in June, in which Kim pledged to work toward denuclearizing his country. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
In an op-ed titled, "The Press Isn't the Enemy, It is the Protector," Joseph Holt writes, quote, "We thank soldiers for their service because they devote themselves to protecting our freedoms, and we should. But we should also thank the media for the same reason, especially when the stakes have never been higher." Our next guest is a Marine veteran who has done both jobs, and he's here to set the record straight. Dave Brooks is deputy editor for the Daily Caller News Foundation, also served in the Marine Corps for 6 years, from 2004 to 2010. David, a perfect voice for this. As I said, you have been in both roles in your life. When you saw this op-ed and you read that comparison, what did you think?
Well, let's start with the obvious point. The vast majority of journalists didn't sign up to protect our nation and values. And this professor wasn't even talking about journalists who do put themselves in harm's way. He was talking about White House reporters who go to the press briefings and instead of asking questions, they pull out a soapbox and deliver sermons until Sarah Sanders shuts them down. And then they head to Twitter like it's their personal diaries and make the stories about themselves. And after that, they want to go to the Trump rallies, and when they get heckled by the president's supporters, they act like they're marching into the Battle of Fallujah. And to compare the two does a disservice to our service members and those men and women who signed up to protect the nation.
Yeah, welcome back to the show. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right, and for the record, he's absolutely right. In fact, I'll go ahead and add something to that because I'm an Air Force veteran, but I'm a fourth-generation military veteran. I'm not a combat veteran, but my dad was and my granddad was. My great-granddad was not. So I'm married to a veteran. My husband is a veteran. And when I hear people make these spurious comparisons, because people some have never been out of the country, those who have were out of the country as tourists, it is one thing to go to the Middle East on a jaunt to Dubai and stay in one of the high-rise hotels and be a tourist. It's another thing to go to Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or any one of our operational theaters with a uniform on and a target on your back and your ID card and dog tags and, go do your job overseas, which in some cases is killing the enemy. There is no excuse for journalists, I don't care how fantastic you are, unless you've actually been embedded with active duty service members doing reporting that way, then by all means, receive your kudos. You deserve them. But if you're just a regular journalist comparing yourself to a military veteran, it's ridiculous. And I don't see any reason why any military veteran, any person who is the spouse of someone who's a veteran, any person who is a mom of someone who's overseas serving right now, someone who put their hand on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution of support and defend, not uphold, support and defend the Constitution of the United States and to obey all lawful orders given to them in the chain of command and to honor the President of the United States as the commander in chief of our military. Please sit down if you think that that person is doing the same type of job as a journalist. It's not in the same realm. Now, there are other people who do amazing, heroic work and they deserve their kudos and it's deserved that if you're doing something like that, that people pay respect for what you're doing because you're doing extra. You're out there a little bit further. But if you're just doing journalism, and I say that as a member of the media, I've written for publications before, I understand how stressful it can be chasing down sources or having people hold you accountable for what you've written. They hate you. They're sending you death threats. I have a whole folder and a private investigator who searches through these things for me when I write something that people don't like and they reach out and start talking about me and the kids. Yeah, the guns get cleaned, the ammo gets checked, the PI gets a copy of everything that's going on. I understand that, but that's still not in the realm of active duty service members who some never leave the United States, but most do. Most service members serve at least a tour of duty, possibly multiple tours of duty in one of our overseas operational theaters. That's ridiculous. I don't care how good it felt to write that down and get it published in some, paper. It's not the same thing. And for those who don't understand that, it's okay. It's okay for you not to understand it. It's perfectly fine. So I want to open up the call lines as we get into, there's a little bit of breaking news that I want to, we already have a caller. I want to cover this story really quickly before we get into the final five for this hour. 866-963-2037 are the call lines, 866-963-2037. So they've got documents out showing that a man was arrested at a New Mexico compound who was training kids to shoot up schools. The guy's name is Siraj Wahaj. Guess what he used to do? He was born Jeffrey Kearse, and he was raised in Brooklyn, and his mom was a nurse, and his dad was a hospital dietitian. And his brother is a writer and an editor. He actually joined the Nation of Islam, changed his name to Jeffrey 12X, and then he started to believe and talk about his belief that white people are devils. He says, I preached it, I taught it, I believe it. And he's really had kind of a rough go. I mean, he used to be the vice president of the Islamic Society of North America. He was also the leader of the Muslim Alliance of North America. And now, according to breaking news on KWCH.com, he's been training children in New Mexico on how to commit school shootings. I'll let you guys draw the inferences there. I mean, I could say, but Elaine from Florida. Thanks for calling into the show.
Hi, how are you? I'm a first-time caller, but
Thanks
I've listened to you quite a while.
Awesome. What's your comment?
Listen, I just want to get through few minutes that I have to talk to you. If everybody could possibly listen to a sermon by Jesse Duplantis at the Southwest Believers Conference on Friday, August 3rd, it is so relevant to everything that we're talking about today. And I do believe he preached it for Trump without bringing up his name. It was on what he called the status quo and how it is destroying everything we have because nobody wants to rock the boat. And when God sends his assigned people, chosen people in, because we, his people, refuse to allow ourselves not to be controlled and governed by idolaters and outsiders, that there's going to be a problem. And it happened with Samson. He sent him in there. He was God's chosen. He wasn't everybody's. But the Israelis rose up against him and sided with the Philistines to destroy him because he was causing problems for the Philistines, which was causing problems for the Israelis, they felt at that time. And it's like the handwritings on the wall with all these elections and like you're talking about this gentleman that was doing these things, and God only knows what else is going on out there. But the church and the Christian peoples as a whole, we need to stand together and know that we stand firmly on the Word of God and only on the Word of God. There's no compromise. And I truly believe Trump was sent in here. I truly believe he is God's chosen man for this moment, as long as he meets our Lord's needs and wants for us. But if we keep turning our back on him, if we keep allowing those that are quote-unquote supposedly in charge, and supposedly that we have put in office, that we are paying to sit there and cut his throat and knock our knees out from underneath us, there's so much rhetoric going on, and I don't see us standing together as a whole per se and facing the consequences that we are going to be assaulted. Jesus told us they're going to come against us. But I see all these other people, Rosie O'Donnell and all them others out there, and where are we? Where are we? We're sitting at home.
Well, and I think the voter turnout last night was interesting, which is why I want to take a little bit more of an in-depth look across the country. I know here in Missouri, it was elevated turnout for the Democrats, but they always tend to turn out on special elections when they have a ballot issue, and they had right to work to defeat last night, which they did so handily with propaganda and outside dollars, $25 million from outside the state. So I totally understand what you mean. If anything, what you're saying is we got to get motivated and stop sitting back and allowing these kind of trains to kind of run like runaway trains without any control. We have control. All we have to do is get out and vote. Thanks for calling the show today. And I just have to say, I agree 100%. We should be praying and we should be voting. And that's all we can do, really. Of course, phone bank, do those types of things, but praying and voting. We have to be motivated and activated to want to get out there and make sure that these political movements aren't successful. And, the saddest part about, I think, what I see happening on the left is that they have to find an issue to enrage their voters about. And so the people are enraged and they're going out, but it's spilling over into regular society where people are screaming at each other and yelling. And, there's a lot of real animus that's going on. And that's not okay. That's not what we want for our regular everyday interactions. Praying and voting doesn't involve screaming and yelling at anyone. And I know how it was when I was first on Facebook. I thought I could change people's minds on Facebook. Well, Facebook is a place for social media gathering and sharing, but most people remain in their own silos reading information that confirms and validates what they know. Sometimes someone will read something that you've posted and they disagree with you politically, and they'll read it and they'll have a bit of an epiphany, but more often than not, that's not the case. And so what I see happening a lot is, people will get into an echo chamber and start, talking about a subject or a person, and then that will spill over into them approaching that person online and, trying to bludgeon them into believing or not believing or changing their mind about something. And that's just not going to happen. Not because people can't change their minds, but you're not going to change their mind by attacking them on Facebook. So a real life person-to-person interaction, almost anything is possible. People can really have a meeting of the minds and click and come to an understanding. It's much harder to do from hundreds of miles away on a Facebook page or a live stream or something like that. Let's talk to CJ from Wisconsin. Thank you for calling into the show.
Hi, Stacey, longtime listener. I was I didn't hear your complete conversation with your last guest, who was speaking of bleeding heart conservatism.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you remembered George W. Bush's theory of compassionate conservatism and how it seemed like that was going to work with faith-based organizations. I believe that charity comes from God, and it's also more efficient. And when the Twin Towers fell, that concept kind of fell by the wayside. But I was wondering if you can kind of make a parallel between that and what your last guest was speaking of.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for calling, CJ, and thank you for listening to the show. So first of all, I think she was having trouble articulating what she wanted to share. And from what I'm understanding of what she said during the interview and what I've read about the book is that she's saying that there's a place for conversation. And when we are hard on the right, like the way that I term myself, or hard on the left, it leaves no room for people to talk. And that millennials like herself, younger Americans, want to find a way to have movement, not to be gridlocked, and to have conversations with each other. So she's a conservative, she's a Republican, and she explains her beliefs in the book, and it's pretty boilerplate. But she's also talking about a means by which people can communicate and get somewhere. Now, I think CJ makes a fantastic point, which is, bleeding heart and compassionate conservatism. If you've been around long enough or read anything about George W. Bush's attempts at that, those were, for me, some of his low points, because I thought he was a great president, but he was also very much pro-illegal immigration, pro-amnesty, very wishy-washy on that as an issue. And his presidency played a negative impact, which we're still feeling today. Look at the southern border. Look at the lawlessness there. Look at the inability of legislators to make any decisions that could seal our border and protect Americans. This is a problem that is a part of the George Bush presidential legacy. Please don't email me and say he was perfect and what's wrong with me. We all know he was a human being and he wasn't perfect. And so, there's plenty wrong with me. I'm a person, but that's not one of my issues. And so I think she's trying to take the term back and say, instead of the liberals always being the ones who are seen as compassionate, conservatives are compassionate too, and here's how. And I haven't had a chance to complete the book, but I'm hoping that that is how she articulated. It sounded like that was what she was trying to do. Earlier in the first segment, I said we interview people who are authors because wealthy people read books. Did you really take that to mean that no one else reads books but wealthy people? No, I was making an analogy about prioritizing some activities over others in an effort to emulate the behavior of people who are successful. I don't think that's that nuanced, at least for people who are willing to hear me out and understand what's going on here. So we have just another minute or so. We have a couple minutes left, and I'm surprised that this guy was able to operate for this long. This Siraj Wahaj, I can't believe that's actually the name he adopted. His name was Jeffrey Kearse, and he changed his name to Siraj Wahaj. Yeah, I said it. I hope that doesn't violate any free speech or safe speech laws by me saying that sounds ridiculous. But it is. It's totally ridiculous. He actually was training these kids. And so, his middle name is IBN, by the way. He was training children with assault rifles at a compound near the Colorado border where 11 hungry children were found in filthy conditions. They say they want him held without bail. They didn't bring up the school shooting accusation in court on Wednesday during the initial appearance because they're prosecuting him for abusing the kids. The remains of a boy were also found on the compound, but they've not yet been able to identify the remains of that young boy. Oh, man. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is what's going on in the country. Let's keep praying about it, and we'll be back with more in hour 2 right after these messages.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
It was a time when men rebuilt the ruins. With one hand they laid bricks, with the other they held a weapon. Nehemiah said, "Let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach." Our nation, after many years of decline, is in a state of moral destruction. The cry is going out.
Do you see the distress we're in?
Join us in the battle. To learn more about our mission, visit urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A New York congressman is arrested for insider trading, accused of passing along corporate secrets to his son. Jared Halpern has more.
Republican Chris Collins is accused in a federal indictment of using inside information about a biotech company to sell stock and avoid big losses. Prosecutors say Collins got early word a drug company based in Australia was not seeing good results in a medical trial and passed that information on to his son. The congressman's son has also been charged. In a statement, attorneys for Collins say they will mount a vigorous defense and clear his good name. House Speaker Paul Ryan says while the question of guilt or innocence is a question for the courts, Collins won't serve on the House Energy and Commerce Committee until the matter is settled. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Voters in Missouri have opted against the state's right-to-work law, giving unions a rare win at a time when many states have been leaning towards right-to-work laws. Jonathan Williams of American Legislative Exchange Council admits it is a bit of a setback for the right-to-work movement nationally.
But I do think that this was a case where special interest groups, mainly being the unions, heavily outspent supporters of right to work by about a 10-to-1 margin, dropping somewhat in the neighborhood of $20 million to mischaracterize and defeat the right to work law that the Missouri legislators had passed just recently to make Missouri a right to work state. Now, there's a vast majority of U.S. states that are right to work states. People are seeing the economic benefits of it in states all across the country, including union-dominated states. Wisconsin and Michigan moved in that direction. So I think while it's a loss for supporters of right to work last night, I think it's going to be somewhat of a blip in the radar as the nation, because of the Janus Supreme Court ruling and the movement towards so many states in support of right to work, continues to move forward.
An Ohio-based Tea Party activist says the Republican Party learned some valuable lessons in last night's special congressional election. Chad Groening has more.
On Wednesday morning, Republican Troy Balderson held on to a slim lead with just over 50% of the vote. But many media outlets have not officially declared him the winner, and the narrow, thin margin is almost guaranteed a recount. But the bigger concern is that this special election will only be for a term through the end of the year, and Balderson is back on the campaign trail today against Democrat Danny O'Connor for a November rematch. Tom Zalestowski is executive director of the Portage County Tea Party, one of the largest Tea Party organizations in Ohio.
The lesson that the Republican establishment refuses to learn is that the days of Karl Rove telling you to run to the middle to win are over. Donald Trump ran to the right, and he won.
And Zalestowski says Trump helped Balderson even though he was an establishment Republican.
If Donald Trump had not come on Saturday, and if the Tea Party members in Ohio had not come out and done their duty and voted for someone that we don't even like, but we knew we had to hold that seat, he loses.
And the Tea Party leader says turnout would be much higher in November.
In November, they'll be turning out for the big Senate race between Sherrod Brown and Jim Renacci. They'll be turning out for the governor's race. And that turnout will pretty much ensure that Balderson wins by a bigger majority because there are more Republicans in the Ohio 12. So we certainly expect to hold that seat.
I'm Chad Groening.
The number of lives lost to Lombok's second deadly earthquake has government officials scrambling to get the remaining survivors off the small island. Greg Palcott has more.
Death toll from Sunday's earthquake on the Indonesian island of Lombok now put at over 130, injured nearly 1,500, homeless at over 150,000. The earthquake rocked the northern side of the tourist island, the same place another quake hit 1 week before, leaving 16 dead. Now it's a matter of survival for those on the island. Food, medicine, and water being flown in from the Indonesian capital of Jakarta and elsewhere, also brought in by boat. Temporary shelters being erected for those displaced. Lombok is just across from the very popular tourist island of Bali, but it still gets its share of visitors, including American. Some 5,000 foreign and Indonesian tourists had to be evacuated from 3 popular small islands off the Lombok coast. In London, Craig Palcott, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
My name's Jerry. Smoking and dealing meth turned what I thought was the American dream into a nightmare of addiction. But Teen Challenge helped me wake up to a world of hope. Now I'm drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
If you look at more of the national environment, I mean, we got a taste of it in Ohio, but we saw some of it, too, in Washington, where they have a top 2 primary system. There's very little you can look at the results last night and say Republicans had a very good night. They squeaked out something of a victory in Ohio. You could call it a victory, but it's a very Pyrrhic one.
Yeah, and I think what Dak is doing is why I like Dak. I like him because he's smart and he's a leader. This is what leaders do. They don't let Twitter influence their opinion. Followers go on social media and join the avalanche. Leaders go on social media, have a conviction, and are not influenced by you not liking their opinion.
Let the president know in no uncertain terms that we are alive, awake, and we are woke. We are not going away.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the program. At Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. StacyOnTheRight.com on the website. You can find a whole bunch of fantastic content there. You can read all my columns that have appeared all over the place under the column tab on the website. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's still Truth for Youth Week. Call into the number at 800-733-4737, 800-733-4737, or visit truthforyouth.com. And we're going to be unpacking a bunch of really good items right now. I love that news mashup from my producer at the start of the show, because I have a little bit more of that audio that you hear. Dak Prescott has really, really set the world on fire by being a black man who plays for the NFL and also refuses to kneel during the anthem. And others are saying he's a traitor, he hates himself, and calling him all kinds of names. But the fact is, the majority of the players who make the most money are not participating in these anthem protests. And so that's what they were discussing. You got Jason Whitlock and a couple of others, and they're having this conversation about who's doing the kneeling and why or why not. It's number 6.
Dak's not on Twitter all day. He's running a franchise. By the way, you'll notice about all the anthem stuff, the stars aren't talking about it. It is overwhelmingly marginal players who don't have as much to lose. Dak's not talking about it. Breeze isn't talking about it. Matt Ryan's not talking about it. Luke Kuechly's not talking about it. Most players aren't. So, you know, I mean, to me, this is why I like Dak. It's unpopular, but frankly, he's putting in 75 hours a week. I want him to worry about football during the season, and then if he's got an off day, worry about social causes.
It's really what my respect for Dak is growing, just because I think this takes a tremendous amount of courage. I think most people are silent on this issue because they just don't want the hassle of the social media backlash. But I think Dak Prescott speaks for 97% of the players. And I think there's a loud minority on social media and a handful of NFL players and DeMaurice Smith who are pushing this because it's good for their brand building. It's good chaos, keeps them in the news. But Dak Prescott has stepped out here on a limb and been a real leader. I hope other guys follow him behind him because he's just talking common sense.
Wow. So it's, in other words, Jason Whitlock is saying, hey, How about everybody just express their opinions? How about everybody just say what they believe about the issue and move on from there? Instead of saying, well, you're black and you have to do this and you're white and you have to do that. How about just saying, okay, so on the anthem issue, where do you come down? Oh, so you don't feel like kneeling. Why? Why? In advancing the conversation and getting everyone to give their opinion if they want to, if they have time, because a lot of these players aren't talking about this issue because they're busy practicing and upping their game because they have games to win, because they want to make it to, the Super Bowl. I mean, they're beyond talking about issues that are in the news because they have work to do. Just think about it. Have you ever, I'm sure this has happened to you, you're sitting at work and you've got it going on. Everything's flowing. You're making your way through your list, and you see an end to the day, and it ends with you getting almost everything done. And then your phone starts ringing, and the phone calls that you're getting are, maybe they're work related, maybe they're not, but they're time wasters, and they've taken you out of that zone. These really high paid NFL players want to operate in that zone where they're conditioning, working their plays, memorizing their plays, working with their teammates so it becomes second nature, where they get out of thinking through the play and they're in habit mode, where the pathways in their brain have been created and they are literally moving through without giving it a second thought. If someone calls a play, they don't have to think through that play. They just know how to execute it. Their bodies move and they are in sync with each other. And now they can get into that higher order thinking where they're anticipating the next move. They're putting other activities, that the actions of other players on the opposing team, when they see those actions happening, they know, oh, my natural progression is this, but I see him moving. I can work with that too. That's where NFL players go from being a good team to being a great team that can win the Super Bowl. That's where these higher paid players are. And so, I guess in their minds, pardon them if they can't be bothered with this latest sideshow, which is people getting all upset because some people don't want to kneel. I mean, the NFL has already come out and said it's damaging the brand. It's decreasing attendance at the games. It's costing them their bottom line. How much longer are we going to watch NFL players continue to basically tear apart their own livelihood for the sake of a cause that isn't being impacted by them kneeling? If they were kneeling and something was actually happening, I could see them saying, well, we're losing brand share, we're losing market share, but if we keep going, we're going to see our goal, and then we can work on, rebuilding the image of the NFL. They're not even getting anywhere with this. Chicago's still having shootings and murders and everything you can think of, homicides galore. St. Louis, same thing. Baltimore, same thing. Everywhere you look, it's the same situation. So if nothing's happening, why in the world would other players who are successful, who actually really have good contracts and aren't like Colin Kaepernick just tossing themselves into free agency with a hope and a prayer, why would they want that? Why would they want to join in on that? I know I wouldn't. So let's delve into an NFL star, since we're talking about the NFL. I thought this was such a fantastic bit of information, and it's such an example. And that's not to say that I don't know about other NFL players who are doing great philanthropic works, but this strikes close to home for me because this is a man who has been marginalized on occasion for his views because he's very pro-life. And his name is Ben Watson. You've heard of him before, New Orleans tight end. And he's a true sports hero for using his position to push for righteous causes and to talk about things that intersect between sports and American life and our Christian walk. He uses his platform to connect those things together. And it's amazing to watch because he's gifted with it. It's clearly something he's been called to do. So he's been working on helping out pregnancy clinics to save babies. So Life News has this story up over there. It's former Baltimore Ravens player. He basically got an opportunity to give an ultrasound machine to Severna Park Pregnancy Clinic. That's the name of it. And their machine wasn't working. And the ultrasound is how they show the women who come in and they're abortion minded. They show them the ultrasound and show them, look, it's not a clump of cells. It's a little baby in there. And if you just give it a chance, that baby will be, you're that baby's mom. So he gave them a state-of-the-art 3D/4D ultrasound machine to use to replace their old unit. And to celebrate the gift that he made, which he used the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission and Focus on the Family's option ultrasound program to kind of put the actual donation together. The staff, board, and 2 client families granted him a tour of the pregnancy clinic, which serves primarily women at risk for abortion in the Baltimore area. Now, Pregnancy Clinic Ministries CEO Pamela Palumbo led the tour. She explained how her 3 clinics, including one in Bowie and another in Annapolis, defend life against Maryland's completely unrestricted abortion industry. Now, he actually, back in 2016, you might remember, Mr. Watson took Planned Parenthood to task for their mission to exterminate black people and said that abortion, in his mind, is the greatest driver of racial divide in the United States. Now, he also, after talking with the staff about fatherlessness and how to empower fathers who might accompany these young women to these clinic visits, that he also gave one of the 10-year-old boys who was there, he took time out with him and talked to him about what being a Christian man means and kind of, did a quick mentor session with him. So I love that. It's good news. It's something nice for us to think through, especially since I'm about to bring you all the way down, because you probably thought crazy Uncle Joe was out of things for a bit. Well, Joe Biden is still considering running for the presidency. I know it's shocking, but he is. And he has a foundation. And so what he did is he's actually sent out through his foundation a press release that is about his new initiative dubbed As You Are. It's a parental rejection, basically it guilts parents into not talking to their kids about if a child says they're coming out as LGBTQ, XYZ, etc. His foundation says, don't do that. Don't reject these kids. He says family rejection can lead to heartbreaking outcomes for these youth. So we want to share your stories about the value of acceptance because you deserve to be safe and affirmed. He doesn't talk about how the spike in suicide for transgender people in general, comes after they've had the hormones and the surgery and they've completely obliterated their bodies, and then they realize they can't go back, and then suicide increases by 45%. He doesn't talk about how many kids have been through counseling and been helped out of gender dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, and been able to assume and be in their correctly assigned body and recognizing that they are what God has made and living fruitful, healthy lives. No, Mr. Biden didn't have anything to do with that. He's just got to make sure that people who have children who are struggling with this, in addition to everything that they're going through, also have to struggle with being guilty because he is trying to guilt them into feeling bad about themselves. He says, family rejection significantly contributes to negative outcomes. For LGBTQ young people, specifically severe depression and suicidal ideation, rejecting behavior is not limited to a parent disowning or kicking out their child. It can also include subjecting young people to conversion therapy, blocking their access to LGBTQ friends and networks, and keeping their identity a secret. Are you kidding me, Joe Biden? First of all, what does he know about it? Who made him an expert on this subject? And second of all, why should we listen to him and take advice from him on what to do with kids? Why? Because he was the vice president at one point? So what? So that's a political position. So I think, when we look at Joe Biden, sometimes we tend to marginalize him by finding him funny because he's so wacky, and, his nickname in some circles is Crazy Uncle Joe. But this is a man who genuinely wants to be leftist enough to run for the presidency in 2020. He doesn't just want to be about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren. He feels like his name should be in the mix. And this campaign by the Biden Foundation, this is a part of him staying in the mix and showing potential voters that he's woke. But our culture's obsession with glorifying transgenderism and normalizing the so-called LGBTQ thing is actually indicative of the sickness that's going on in our nation. That we spend time, waste so much time devote so much time to that issue instead of protecting children from sexual trafficking, protecting kids in other countries from being sexually trafficked into our country. The fact that do you see the problem there? You got one that's it's totally a non-issue. If nothing else, it's a non-issue because it affects such a tiny sliver of Americans. We're talking about less than 1% of all Americans who are genuinely body dysmorphic. Not people who are doing it because it's cool and it's the Vogue thing to do. People who genuinely have the disorder. Less than 1% of Americans. That's still a significant number of people, but not in comparison to the human trafficking and everything else that's going on. I feel sad to see Joe Biden go down this road because I feel like he should know better. All right, when we get back, we are going to be talking about Rosie O'Donnell and the Trump rallies and how she thinks they're not real. And that's crazy pants too. You know it. Stay there.
Hi, I'm Kevin Sorbo. You may know me from my TV series Hercules or Andromeda, or one of my hit films such as Let There Be Light, God's Not Dead, or What If. I wanted to invite you to offer your full support for the Ministry of Preborn and its leader, Dan Steiner. The team at Preborn is very focused and very successful at saving preborn babies from abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she'll choose life 80% of the time. For $140, you can help save 5 babies' lives. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. To donate, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby.
Every baby deserves to be born.
Up next, Carol Swain with 2 minutes to think about it. From poverty to professor, from GED to PhD, a bold Christian speaking truth to power. Here's Carol with today's 2 minutes.
Hello, folks. Do you trust God to get you where you think you need to be in life? Or do you feel you have to make things happen for yourself? As a mover and shaker, I have spent a good portion of my years trying to get myself where I thought I needed to be. Along the way, I learned some truisms. The harder I strive towards a goal, the further it seems to slip away. When I relax and allow God to direct my path without any unnecessary interference from me, I see tremendous breakthroughs. God makes things happen that I could have never orchestrated. We know from Revelation 3:7-8, that the doors he opens no man can close, and the doors he closes no man can open. I've learned to pray, prayerfully set my goals, and watch for what God is doing. The hardest thing I have to contend with is not trying to help him do what I think he ought to be doing in my life. Trust me, God doesn't need us out front navigating the ship. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." He also tells us not to be wise in our own eyes. In other words, we're really not as clever as we think we are. We thrive and we grow when we have a healthy trust and a reverent fear of the Lord.
To learn more about Carol and the Carol Swain Foundation, visit carolmswain.net and make sure you follow her on Facebook at Professor Carol M. Swain and on Twitter at Carol M. Swain.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
He's bad because he doesn't know how to inspire people or evoke that emotion in them of
What about his
truth and of
rallies?
knowing. And there, first of all, people are paid, Chris. You know that. People were paid since he went down on the escalator. He pays people to show up at
Right,
those
but
rallies.
I don't
That
know
is a
that
fact.
that's. But I don't know that that's why he gets tens of thousands at the rallies. I think he captures a
Well,
lot
he
of
doesn't
emotion
get
for
tens
people.
of thousands. When did he get tens of thousands at
A
the
lot
last
of
rally?
these.
Tell me when.
No, not at the Tampa. I think they only had 9,000 seats, and there were people outside. But Rosie, I've seen them. He gets big groups of people who come out, He gives themes that resonate. Whether they're positive or not,
Chris?
that's up to other people to decide. Maybe
But
some
Chris,
are. I don't know.
those
I can't.
people paid?
I don't have the facts that his crowds are bought
But you
off.
can
I
look
don't have
on.
that.
You can look at. Well, you can look at all the requests for extras to come and cheer and with signs for him. You can find those tangible pieces of evidence. Those are not real rallies.
Aren't they? 20, 30,000 people packing out stadiums and stuff. It sounds kind of real to me. Welcome back to the show, Stacey Washington. Don't forget, it's Truth for Youth Week. We would love to have you have your copy, your free copy of this manga comic with the New Testament on the back. It's a fantastic book, you guys. And we'd love for you to have your own copy for your teen that's free, but you can also get multiple copies for other teens in your life that you might have in mind when you hear that. The teen that pops into mind, that's one that you should get a copy for too. And at $2, it's almost free. I mean, that's almost free. So we're talking about either going to truthforyouth.com or calling the number 800-733-4737, 800-733-4737. And we'd be so happy for you to participate with us and get these Bibles into the hands of high school students, especially sharing them at high school, which school is starting like every day. School districts go back. Next week is going to be a big week for school districts in Missouri to go back, and so on and so forth. So please, truthforyouth.com and if you're watching on the stream, all the information's right there for you. So interesting that Rosie O'Donnell is so adamant about Trump rally goers being paid when we know there's no organization that does that on the right. We don't have any organizations that pay people to go to rallies on the right side of the political spectrum, but they do on the left. On the left side, they actually have, it's fascinating. On the left, they have George Soros foundations. So any one of the Tides foundations and the little offshoots underneath, the renamed and rebranded Acorn organization, the Occupy Wall Street parent organizations. They run ads in Craigslist. So Rosie O'Donnell's talking about, you haven't seen the ads? Yeah, those are ads for leftists to come out and do organizing, and they're paid by the hour, not for conservatives. Sorry, we just don't have anybody who pays people to do that. We have volunteers, and we have people who are staffers. Just like the Democrats have staffers, the Republican organizations have staffers as well. But the majority of the people you see out doing something, when it's door knocking, those are all unpaid volunteers, and the rally goers are just people who want to go hear some Trump. They like him. They respect his mojo. They want to listen to him. They want to see him in person. They want to be able to say, I went and I was in the room with Trump and I had on my Trump t-shirt. And I mean, come on now. Do you not have a Trump t-shirt if you're on the right? I know I have a super cool one. It looks like Harley Davidson. It looks like the Harley Davidson symbol, but in the middle it says Trump. I wore that to a rally that I spoke at. It was an actual biker rally. And I was there, and the biker rally was opened up with prayer. That's what I'm talking about. Don't stereotype. Of course, make your judgments. Of course, be wise, but don't stereotype. Those bikers had their heads bowed, and then we had a great rally, and everybody had on, their Trump t-shirts and stuff like that. I just think that's fun. And if you're on the other side and you're doing that and you're having fun, good for you too. So now I want to talk about this. There's a red state Democrat who is siding with Donald Trump on funding the wall. Now, this is pretty interesting because most of the Democrats, no matter how their race is running, they're not willing to go to the wall. They're not willing to do, because right now, remember how they said gay is the new black? I hated that slogan. Well, it's refugee and illegal immigrant. That's the new black. And by new black, that refers to the fact that blacks used to be the core constituency and the people that all of the policies in the Democratic Party were aimed at helping black people, helping working class people, helping union people. And those were core constituencies. And now all of those groups have been swept aside, and it's illegal aliens. So you know who it is. It's Joe Donnelly. No shock there. Joe Donnelly is breaking from his Democrat overlords and wants President Trump to have the money to build his wall. So you got Senator Joe Donnelly, Democrat, Indiana. He's facing a new round of ads criticizing his position on immigration this week. And so now he's come out and said that Donald Trump should get much more than the $1.6 billion the Senate Appropriations Committee has been preparing to send him. Now, I going to disagree with him on that. Donald Trump needs $25 million in appropriations today. Not next week, but today. Not next year, not some nebulous, let's give him 1.6 bill here and 2 bill there. No, $25 billion right now. Then he could have the Army Corps of Engineers mobilize a team of contractors from all over the country to get the sections of wall built, and it would be done before Christmas, if not before springtime. If you're not that serious about it, you're not paying attention to these news stories. So you've got Donnelly saying now he's willing to vote for the funding because he wants to keep his seat because that power is just too sweet. And you've got President Trump saying he's willing to shut the government down over it, which to me, I'm like, yes, shut it down. Everyone's going to get paid, first of all. How do I know that? Because the government was shut down when I was on active duty and our credit union funded us just like we were getting paid the regular way. Our direct deposits came right through, little automatic payments to this and that went right out. It was business as usual. Anyone who's furloughed still gets paid. They may not get paid right then. If their bank doesn't front them the money, when the federal government puts the money back, they get the money. Plus, they get like it's some other little additional benefit that they get for the people who are furloughed. In other words, a government shutdown isn't really a government shutdown, except for the purposes of Democrats demonizing Republicans because they can't stand the idea that somebody might not be going to work. But it's not that nobody's getting paid. Oh, please. He says, Joe Donnelly says, he doesn't want under any circumstances for there to be a shutdown. He said, Congress should absolutely provide the president with a larger amount of border wall funding this fall to avoid a shutdown. I'm fine with providing him some more. I actually voted for border wall funding 3 different times, he said during an interview. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with $3 billion, 3.5, 4, or $5 billion right this fall. How about $25 billion, Joe? How about you be fine with that? Donnelly supported Trump's immigration bill, which would cut legal immigration, provide $25 billion for the wall, provide a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million young immigrants. No. How about no pathway to citizenship? Nobody gets any kind of green cards or anything if they've ever received even one sliver of benefits from the U.S. government or the taxpayers. If you've ever been to an emergency room, if you had your baby in an emergency room, that means you can't be a citizen. How about if you want to come into this country under asylum rules, if you come over the border illegally, you're turned around immediately. How about we change that law? You can't just come here and yell asylum and then we take you to a different line. No. Asylum applicants, the only ones who will have their claims considered, have to apply from outside the country at a U.S. consulate or embassy in their home country so they can provide documentation. Oh, if we were to crack down on this the same way we crack down on people jaywalking in big cities, the way we crack down on people parking on the wrong side of the street on trash day, the way we crack down on people who paint their garage the wrong color for their subdivision association, the way we crack down on people buying ginseng. Some couple in southern Missouri bought ginseng in Arkansas and brought it over the border from Arkansas into Missouri and kept it. And since they bought $100 worth, they've been prosecuted and convicted for illegally trafficking in ginseng. But we got people crossing the border, raping people, committing all kinds of crimes, and then they get to stay here. They get released into the country so they can do some more crime. So Donnelly may be soft on immigration from a Democrat's perspective, but it's a far cry from the Gang of Eight bill, which gave the president supposedly billions for the wall. Now, Donnelly is up against a Republican named Mike Braun, and Mike Braun doesn't buy it. Mike Braun is absolutely like, this ain't real. This is not who he really is. The quote from him is, my gut would tell me he wasn't saying that 9-10 months ago, and he's probably even going to be cut some slack on this by his base so he can stay alive and have a chance of staying in contention for the election. So Braun, who is the Republican, Mike Braun, the polling shows him up by 1. And so that is why Mike Donnelly is talking like this. If the polls had Mike Braun down by 10, Donnelly up by 10, or even up by 5 or 6, Donnelly would not be talking about funding the wall. So he's an opportunist. And he's someone who's only concerned with maintaining his power. And that's the wrong kind of person that we want. We don't want that. Indiana voters, Hoosiers don't need that. They need someone who believes in protecting the rule of law, which it's a trickle-down effect. And it's not lost on me that the kind of lawlessness that we see all over the country, that the same people who say they want to stop school shootings, they want to stop the shootings in Chicago and St. Louis, they want to lower the violence, they want to stop people from owning guns, they're the same ones that promote lawlessness on the southern border, which actually is a driver in all of the shootings that we see in inner cities across this country. Also, the same people who are declaring these inner city areas that are crime-infested sanctuary cities, which increases the level of crime, are the same ones who are in control of those areas. It's like they're saying, look what we've done to this inner city area. We've totally destroyed it. We've trashed it. The schools are horrible. The cost of living is low, but so is the tax base. And there's tons of crime. Tons of people living in this area who don't have enough money to make ends meet and have to use some form of government assistance to help them. This is our area that we run. How much do you love it? Now let's make all the rest of America just like this. I know you've escaped to the suburbs and you think you shouldn't be impacted by this, but we want to bring some illegal immigration to the suburbs as well. Why would we put up with that? Why are we as Americans allowing the same people who have destroyed our inner cities and ruined so many millions of lives in the process, why are we allowing them to be in control of the southern border? Why do we allow them to have any victories at all? One of the most depressing aspects of last night's primaries here in the state of Missouri was the fact that due to ballot language and the fact that we elected a governor who did not have the common sense not to have an affair during a political campaign, Governor Greitens, we actually had right to work on the ballot, and the wording was that you had to vote yes. And Missouri voters in the Show Me State tend to vote no on any ballot issue that they haven't been sat down by somebody that they know and respect and told, you got to vote yes on this. So George Soros and the unions poured in $25 million. We were out on the weekend getting a few last-minute items for our daughter at a shopping complex on Manchester Road, and there were vote no signs on all of the stop signs in the parking lot. They had vote no signs on the medians, you know, the little grassy areas next to the sidewalk, next to the back of the shopping area that you drive around to get to the main drag. They had vote no signs there. I mean, it was such a saturation. I saw vote no signs everywhere I went for the past 2 weeks. They've been everywhere. So people don't have to really understand what they're looking at or what the issue is. They just think, wow, I have not seen one vote yes sign. It's almost subliminal. You're voting no. So yes, the Democrats turned out to vote no on right to work, but they snookered a whole bunch of Republicans into voting no as well. And the language on the ballot, that was my favorite part. It was just not clear. So I knew what I was reading, but I was like, I even told my husband, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to go out so well. And a couple of my friends who are kind of savvy and they get insider info, they were like, it's going down 60-40. It went down 69-30. Like, it was bad. It was really bad. And we're talking about giving people the right not to have money that they've earned working funneled directly to the Democrats. Now, I have to admit that it might not be as big of an issue because of the Janus decision from the Supreme Court that mandates that people opt in to a union instead of having to opt out. But the unions are already working on ways to subvert that ruling so that it gets mired down in court decisions and they can keep getting the money. But I was like super surprised that all that money poured in. And where were the Koch brothers talk all that trash? Where were they on right to work? Where was Americans for Prosperity pouring money in and getting the signs out and activating the voters? Where were the ads? They just gave it away. And maybe they did it because they gave it away because of the Janus decision. I don't know. I wanted to point out that Project 21, I'm co-chair of Project 21, one of three. There are three of us. National Advisory Council Project 21 for the National Center for Public Policy Research, that we had issued a press release, I believe it was on Monday, about this whole Sarah Zhang story, the New York Times editorial board member and senior technology writer who they discovered in her text messages or her tweets, I should say, her tweets, a lot of really incendiary language and racist language towards white people and, you name it. Really crazy stuff. Well, she's of Korean extraction. She's a Korean American, obviously, American citizen. And our press release got picked up by Breitbart on Tuesday. And now someone just shared with me it got picked up by the Conservative Tribune, by Western Journalism. So I will put this link in the live stream if you want to read the story that they wrote about us commenting on this. It'll be there for you, and I'll also put it on the Facebook page. So that's the music. That means we have one segment left. If you'd like, we can take some calls, but I definitely want to talk to you about Adam Schiff. And I want to give you the list of attendees at that Bedminster fundraiser that was had by the White House and President Trump. Not tonight's fundraiser, although I do have that list too. The one last night. Big, big, big event. Great people were there. All right, we'll be right back. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. There's a new slogan out. You are enough. It's the latest foray into convincing people that self-love is the pathway to freedom and success. This is just repackaged self-esteem nonsense of the same variety preached by secular thought leaders a few decades ago. Instead of going to church, we are encouraged to go to sporting events in huge stadiums on Sunday, or stay home and read the newspaper. Instead of studying the Word of God, we're told to meditate on ourselves while holding crystals and humming. How ridiculous! Joy comes from knowing who we are in Christ. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. So in essence, the opposite of everything we've heard. The meek will inherit the earth. Confidence comes from working hard and living a godly life. Instead of looking for self-esteem, look for God in His scriptures, in His creation, in serving people. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
Today we celebrate the independence of this great nation. I often recall the preamble to the Declaration of Independence that in part reads, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We can't help but notice America's founders listed life as the first inalienable right, or undeniable right endowed by God. Without life, we can't enjoy any other right. Our religious freedoms, right to vote, assemble, and express ourselves are dependent upon our right to life. Abortion denies that basic right, so join me in working to end it. From all of us at Life Issues, happy 4th of July.
Like us on Facebook at Life Issues and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
Securing America.
President Trump has taken a hardline stance on illegal immigration, mostly focusing his efforts on reducing crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border. But up north, America's border with Canada, more than 3,000 miles from ocean to ocean, remains largely unmonitored. And some Border Patrol agents say the emphasis on the southern border has left them with a lack of resources, leading to a big uptick in illegal crossings from America's northern neighbor. And it goes both ways, with thousands of immigrants in the U.S. fleeing to Canada since 2016 to avoid deportation. The most glaring of those vulnerabilities, the ease of entering Canada, where visas are no longer required for Mexican citizens. Much of the new activity is focused on a 30-mile segment of the Vermont-Quebec border. Folks there say they've noticed a spike in illegal crossings, adding to a growing sense of unease in an area not used to being in the political spotlight. I'm Kevin Cork, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacey on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Congressman, before we go any farther, because I want to draw a distinction, since we've been saying here that some of the facts can get muddled here in the president's language. I want to make sure we're being precise in our conversation. Can you agree that there has been no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy that has been presented thus far between the Trump campaign and Russia?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. Now, that's a different statement than saying that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a criminal conspiracy. Bob Mueller will have to determine that. But, of course,
right. So you
Trump
acknowledge
Tower,
that the FBI has not presented it thus far. I'm drawing this distinction because this is what the White House is arguing here, that the president is drawing a distinction, that he is saying when he says hoax and witch hunt that he means one thing and that it's not really trying to disassociate himself from what his national security team says.
Well, first of all, we haven't seen what Bob Mueller has produced in terms of the evidence yet. So in terms of FBI proof, they're not going to present proof to the Congress. We're doing our own investigation, and we've revealed evidence, I think, that certainly goes to the issue of conspiracy and collusion, a lot of which is now public.
Yeah, that's what I just heard. She asked him a really good question. It's CBS's Margaret Brennan. She's got Adam Schiff there, you know. She's asking him, listen, do you at least understand where the president's coming from? He's saying they haven't presented any evidence that he's guilty. Can you at least agree with that? He's like, well, nope, no. Really, dude? So let's move on. Okay, so for tomorrow, I'm going to preview this for you. Lord willing, we will be live with you tomorrow and doing fantastic. And we'll be talking about, this is a story that should be all over the news, especially the cable news outlets, because this is right up their alley. It's international news. It's Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which I've been to, by the way. It's a gorgeous country. It's, you know, Sharia infested, but it's fantastically beautiful there. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is actually really, really ticked off with Canada. They've broken off diplomatic and trade relations. They've recalled their ambassador. They booted the ambassador from Canada to KSA out of the country. They said, you got 24 hours to get out of here. You are no longer recognized. They tweeted that out after sending him a cable. Now, Saudi Arabia's main state wheat buying agency has told grain exporters they will no longer buy Canadian wheat and barley in their international tenders. I will tell you tomorrow why. And it's fascinating. I mean, I could barely believe it when I was reading it myself. I'm like, what? So just file that in your back pocket and know that it's not only Donald Trump who plays rough when it comes to trade. Other countries can get their dander up and play really rough when it comes to unfair trade dealings. The only time people scream about it is when it's America. You see any correlation there? When conservatives get on Twitter and say something, it's a capital case. Liberals can tweet stuff out and it stays up for years. And this is what I honestly think about that, just as an aside before I get to this list. I believe the reason why the liberals' tweets that are so horrible stay up for so long and they're never noted is because they don't have anyone monitoring the liberals' tweets. They only monitor the tweets of conservatives. And then if they see anything even slightly wrong, automatic suspension, yada, yada, yada. That is the reason why there isn't anything going on the liberal side. That's why you can go back and comb through the tweets and see all these old tweets. You're like, man, how did this survive? Nobody's looking. All right, so what was I talking about with this list? Well, I'm on the White House press list. So Pool reported that there were some attendees at the Bedminster estate of President Trump. So Melania is there, and she's entertaining and laying out the best spread for these people. And they had this dinner with business leaders at the Bedminster, New Jersey. I guess you call it White House North. I don't know what nickname we're going to give it, but here were the people who were there. So the company Fiat Chrysler, I'll list some of the companies. Fiat Chrysler, Continental Resources, Johnson & Johnson, PepsiCo, Red Apple Group. And the people, I don't need to list their names. We're talking about the CEOs and head honchos from these companies. Red Apple Group, FedEx, International Paper, MasterCard, Boeing, Ernst & Young, Honeywell, Boston Beer, Lefrak, Newsmax Media, which of course is Mr. Christopher Ruddy, DocuSign, and then of course there were White House staffers who were there, cabinet members, etc., who were also there attending the event. And mixing in with these people. And a lot of the people who attended were the spouses of the individuals who head up these companies. So it was it was a dinner, and it was about, obviously it was a fundraiser, but it was also, a social event where they were just enjoying themselves. So that was last night. They're having another fundraising dinner tonight. So I will review that list and possibly share that tomorrow. And also, if you're on the newsletter list for Stacey on the Right, you get the weekly White House photos on that list. So the photos from the week are the photos that the White House photographer, the press corps' official photographer, and there are more than one, they take pictures of Donald Trump when he's in the White House, and some of them are out when he's out doing things. And so I include the best ones of those in the newsletter that you get on a weekly basis from StaceyOnTheRight.com. So we're planning some fun things over there at StaceyOnTheRight.com, and I'm hoping to see them through and be able to roll those out hopefully in another month or so. But right now, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that you can get that. So we talked a little bit about, in the first segment, I believe it was, I was talking about the Democrat Socialist agenda and how Vox, which is hardly a conservative organization, was outlining how this would cost $42.5 trillion over the next decade. Vox, again, Vox, hardcore leftist publication, says that democratic socialism is having a moment. Senator Bernie Sanders mobilized millions of voters during the 2016 campaign, nominally as a Democrat, but with many self-professed socialists in his bandwagon. And also they covered Ocasio-Cortez, unseating, Joseph Crowley. But they talk about the agenda facing this resistance from regular voters and regular people, not because, like Stephanie Rule said, they're worried about losing their money. No, we ain't worried about losing our money. We're worried about losing our liberty and our lives. The money is just a negative sideshow, but it's actually being alive that most of us are really obsessed with. The promises of Democratic socialists include free college, single-payer health care, guaranteed jobs, but these things would require an astonishingly high expenditures that would cause the federal deficit to skyrocket. Once the costs become clear, most mainstream politicians and voters would surely balk. But making big promises is one thing, paying for them is another. And it's part of the thing that Bernie Sanders did so well. I remember when it was a 2016 campaign, and I would go to, how you go to certain parts of the city and they're very, very liberal. And we have an area like that in St. Louis that is extremely liberal, but they also have some of the best antique shops in the entire metro area. And we were down there. We'd actually gone down for one of the garden tours, and we were doing a garden tour in the city, and we ended up down near this antique district. And so I told my husband, I was like, we're so close. Would you mind? We'll get some ice cream and we'll just walk up and down the street, and maybe I'll pop into just one store. And so he's like, sure. And the kids are like, ice cream? Yeah. Because even teenagers are down with ice cream. So we got some ice cream. We were walking and looking, and I noticed that Bernie Sanders had a storefront down there. And in the window, it was one of those storefronts where the whole storefront is windows, the tall windows, and then the short window on top. And he had a poster. It had to have been 6 or 7 feet tall, 6 or 7 feet wide. And it was a painting of him, and obviously a print of a painting of him. But instead of the painting being in the traditional colors, it was all rainbow colors, and it was kind of splattered a little bit. And it's clearly, obviously Bernie Sanders. But it's done in such a way it was just so festive. It was like, how could you not like this? How could you not buy into this? And his promises, they can never materialize here in America under our current system. It has to be a radical change in what Americans are willing to pay in taxes, almost everything you make, and the control you want to allow the government to have over your everyday life, almost everything you do. Because the government has to be in control and have all of the money in order to implement socialism. And even then, it only works for a little while, and then it starts going downhill. And the reason it can never work for us is because we fund our own defense. Until we find some sugar daddy country that wants to fund our $780 billion in defense that we spend every year, we can't have socialism. So any liberal you talk to who's hardcore into this stuff would say to you, well, there's your answer. Just eliminate the national defense. Just take that right out of the budget and devote it to health care for all, universal basic income, guaranteed jobs, guaranteed housing, etc. what happens if we stop spending $780 billion a year on military? I mean, surely we could reduce it, we could increase it, but what happens the minute we delete that line item from our budget? Well, some country would be like, I'm going in. Now, some Middle Eastern countries would just be satisfied to detonate a nuclear weapon, somewhere in the sky over America and kill 75 to 90% of our population by attrition, because we wouldn't have electricity and we wouldn't have heating and cooling. And, we have, a third to 40% of our population who are on psychotropic drugs 24/7 year round. That's how they live. I mean, we have any number of Americans, 75% is the estimate, who would be dead within 6 months in a case of something like that without our grid. For other nations who don't want to see 90% of us, killed off, they just want to take America over and own it. How long do you think it would take for them to come over? A gun behind every blade of grass or not, we're talking about a seriously horrible idea, getting rid of our defense. But this is the kind of stuff that we end up, when you talk to people, the younger ones especially, this is the kind of conversations you get into. And I'm not saying this anecdotally like I heard someone else say that people, no, I'm talking about when I talk to millennials and younger people who believe in this democratic socialism, and they immediately start talking about eliminating our defense budget. They talk about spending all of our money on health care. They really think that could work. And that is why we as Christians have to be single-minded in our dedication to, because when you don't lead, you know what they say about you don't lead, then you'll be led by some other person who probably isn't as good at it as you are. Sometimes you'll be led by someone who's totally much more fantastic than you, but odds are this is what happens when we pull back and take ourselves out of the culture. We take ourselves out of politics because our influence is needed as Christians. We are needed. So we have to be willing to participate. So yeah, Vox is writing about this. He says the numbers are not partisan. He says, what would be the effects of such an unprecedented spending binge? Federal spending, which typically ranges between 18 and 22% of GDP, would immediately soar past 40% of GDP on its way to nearly 50% within 3 decades, including state and local government spending that would push the total cost of government to 60% of GDP by that point, exceeding the current spending of every country in Europe. This writer at Vox says these numbers are not partisan. They come from the Congressional Budget Office, top liberal think tanks, and the lawmakers themselves. These are their own figures. In order to make this socialist utopia happen, the U.S. would have to seize almost all corporate and personal profits above $90,000 a year. They would have to add, the United States would add an 87% value-added tax. On top of that, those are static analysis figures, which assumes no one's behavior will change as a result of the dramatic changes in economic incentives. Like people like Jeff Bezos wouldn't immediately move all of their assets that they could get their hands on and what they could get their electronics on, move those assets out of the United States before that law took effect. Unless the Democratic Socialists are planning on executing a coup in which one day we're free and everything's going great, and the next morning we wake up and everything's socialist and we have an 87% VAT tax and we only get to keep $90,000 and everything else we own belongs to the government. Come on. You know what? You know that's not going to happen, because the rich people are always the first ones to get their $1,600 an hour lawyers and CPAs to protect their assets. That's why they're rich. So I want to close out the show today on the confession prayers that we have. And we got these are not actually confession prayers, they're Bible verses. But our pastor told us, confess the truth of who you are before God. And if you're struggling with, you've got something going on, or you don't know who you are in Christ, or you're feeling a lot of doubt and anxiety, confessing these scriptures can go a long way in fixing that. So I'm going to give you just a couple because the music's playing, guys. The show's over. I have received the abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness, and I reign in life through Jesus Christ, Romans 5:17. I am a new creation. Old things have passed away, and everything about me is new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. And finally, without me, you can do nothing. When you say that to God, you say, without you, I can do nothing. John 15:5. God bless you. Keep you this evening. Have a great night. Back with you tomorrow.
The views and opinions